Welcome to this episode of Your Future, Your Finances. I'm your host, Brian Kuhn. Here we interview a variety of experts on the topics of personal finance, personal growth, and current events here in Maryland, D.C., and nationally. In this first segment, we will be discussing what businesses and employees should be aware of in their human resources planning. For that, we are meeting with Stephanie Lomax, CEO and founder of HRPro4You, LLC. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian. I appreciate it.
So what is HR and why do businesses need it?
So HR, or human resources, really is not obviously just the management of or the hiring of employees, but also is the management of those. So in addition to hiring them and having those resources in place, it also is managing all the things that happen as they are employees within an organization.
What are some of the mistakes that small businesses make as it relates to HR?
So one of the most common things that I see, because I work specifically with small businesses, is that they don't understand it, so they don't value it, so they don't deal with it. And so oftentimes that can get them into lots of into entanglement and trouble sometimes. But in addition to just not understanding it, they also just don't have a true appreciation of how they hire employees and what that means, how they classify employees and what the law says about that. So just, overall, generally speaking, they just don't have a true understanding of why they need to have human resources function within their organization.
Does the number of employees a business have affect their rules and laws and your advice for them?
It does. It absolutely does. So the old saying is, to whom much is given, much is required, right?
Yep.
So even though small businesses, when they hire their very first employee, they have about 12, 13 federal laws that they're required to follow. As they grow and they hit certain thresholds of employees, additional laws are required to be followed. So it's really important and key, again, to have someone that they're talking with on a regular basis as they're growing to make sure that they're in compliance every step of the way.
Do you recommend having internal HR support or an outside consultant?
So that answer is it depends. That's like the most popular HR answer ever. But it does depend, because depending upon your size and what your infrastructure can sustain. Most of the businesses that I work with, because I do outside consulting, I work with them on varying levels of external HR. However, at a certain point, probably somewhere between 50 and 75 employees, it really is best to have an internal support system, whether that's, a full-time person or a part-time person will depend, but it definitely is, at that point, there definitely needs to be some internal resource that's taking place.
What should small businesses know about potential fines they could face related to HR issues?
Oh, yes. So, unfortunately, fines can, especially for small businesses, be door closing. So ignorance of the law is not an excuse not to follow. So again, really important to have someone that you're talking with. But fines can vary to, from back pay of wages if you have someone misclassified, to, having to pay a fine for repeated violations because either you didn't know or you willfully, which I hope doesn't really happen, violate the law that's in place. So, really it can vary depending upon how many people you're talking about. They can get to be pretty hefty in the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow, yeah. What are some of the topics that managers and employees should be trained on as it relates to HR?
Yes, so if you have anyone that's doing interviewing, hiring in your organization, it is certainly important to have those employees to go through some type of training. It could even be annually, just on the types of things that you can talk to employees about, that you can ask them during the interview process, for example. Conversely, when you're terminating people as well, there are some things that managers should be trained on and know about as it relates to letting employees go. But then also just in the continuum of working with employees on a regular basis, things like the Americans with Disabilities Act or the ADA or Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, those things managers are going to likely be the first line of defense that an employee comes to if they have one of those situations to occur. And so the manager needs to know how to handle that, who to take it to, and when to involve human resources, whether that's an internal person or it's an outside consultant like myself, to help them to kind of manage that process through.
Most businesses know about common federal HR laws, but here in the state of Maryland, are there unique rules and laws they should be aware of?
There are actually, and it even goes beyond state level down to county level. So here in the state of Maryland, in February of 2018, legislation passed that there is an earned sick and safe leave policy that all employers are required to follow. The main difference is, again, so we talked about size. If you have 15 or less employees, it's an unpaid leave, and there's a calculation that goes along with that in terms of how much an employee is entitled to. But if you have more than 15 employees, it's a paid leave. So everyone's required to follow it, but the only difference is whether it's a paid or an unpaid leave. With Montgomery County, they have their own earned sick and safe leave policy. So you have to figure out now which one is more generous to the employee, which is the one that you would then be required to follow.
Okay. Well, this has been great, very helpful. How can folks find you online?
Yes, so I am on social media. I'm at LinkedIn and Twitter. I also have a Facebook page and certainly have a website as well, which is www.HRPro, the number 4, I always have to do that, YOU.com. I also have a monthly podcast, video podcast that airs the first Wednesday of every month, and that can also be found via social media and on my webpage as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for appearing.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. That does it for this segment of Your Future, Your Finances. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.